Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the singer, songwriter, performer. It is going to be the one and only Maggie K De Monde, who is in a band called Scarlet Fantastic and has also been in various other musical combos throughout the decades. And this is the interview, so you're going to find out much, much more. So after several minutes of casual but interesting chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Maggie, it's over to you.
I remember a kiddie party that I had. We were all like throwing ourselves around to Genie. I was totally nuts about Bowie, Roxy, Gary, T-Rex. Yeah, it was all the glammy stuff. But having said that, there was also Gino Washington, Ram Jam Band. And then I suppose it'd have been like, there was Dusty, there was Sandy Shaw. My mum always used to listen to an amazing mixture of stuff. You know, she would listen to Percy Sledge, Edith Piaf, Iron Butterfly. Oh my goodness, talk about psychedelic sort of. Yeah.
So were your parents quite bohemian then?
No, not particularly. They were just a bit bonkers, I think. My dad, of course, loved Frank Sinatra, you know, and who else? You had like kind of, was it, who was it? It wasn't Chuck Berry's dancing party. It was someone else. I can't remember. It was like, oh yeah, and there's Let's Twist Again, like we did last summer. All of that stuff.
Oh,
yeah,
classic stuff. Yeah, because when I was growing up, my parents, I think they got married. We were sort of from the countryside and very working class. So I think when they got married, they kind of sold everything to just get a place together. Because I don't think people in that time ever borrowed money or had any debt. So they would sort of do this kind of thing of, just like get rid of everything, get a house, have a family. And then a record player appeared in the early 70s. And that was when, we started, my brother, I was very influenced by my brother who was 7 years older than me. And he had lots of kind of prog rock, basically. That was his thing. So I got really into prog. But did you have any kind of brothers and sisters who had a influence on your musical moments?
I had a younger brother, bless him, who actually became quite a brilliant photographer and ended up doing all of the early Duran Duran photos, which, funnily enough, he just snapped everything that moved in Birmingham at the time that was on the scene. And in fact, Duran Duran recently, for their 40th anniversary, they used all of his pictures on their merchandise. So it's his pictures that are on the mugs and the jigsaw puzzle and the T-shirts. But back to your question regarding brother influencing me, and I think it was probably me influencing him. But you talked about that when sort of when record players appeared. I had one of those. It was red and cream, and it had was it a dance set? I can't remember. And it had the lid that lifted up. And actually, I do remember things like Frida Payne, Band of Gold, and I remember Hot Legs, Neanderthal Man. I like that. I actually got and I actually did get into, a bit later, I got into Genesis and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, as well as Roxy music. Yeah, I just went through all kinds of stuff, actually. My background is really eclectic. It really is. And living in Birmingham as well, growing up in Birmingham, you had such a mixture of stuff. And by the time we got into the 80s, everyone sort of hung out with everyone. You've got bands like UB40, you've got Steel Pulse. So the reggae thing was quite big and strong, but then you got sort of like new romantics. You've got Duran Duran. You'd had Dexys, which were kind of Midlands, and then of course you got the ska stuff. And then you've got indie stuff from before that, the Au Pairs, and my band, the bands I was in, and it was a really healthy music scene. There was a lot going on, but I mean, prior to that, as a kid, before getting into bands myself, I just went through so many phases. But still to this day, David Bowie is just one of my absolute heroes still. I even have dreams about him where he gives me these messages. Don't tell me I'm mad, but can I just tell you this one dream
that would be great. I love David Bowie, so this is all fun. We could. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing, but I don't know. It's about 4 years ago, and David was in my dream and he handed me 3 segments of a tangerine and they were warm, and I held them in my hand and he'd been holding them in his hand, that's why they were warm. And then we went to this meeting, some kind of meeting, it wasn't an AA meeting, it was some kind of meeting, but the message in the meeting was, and it was sort of agreed that, anyway, the message was, if you let go, you'll find your higher purpose through your higher self. And I woke up and it was like, wow, there's a message from David Bowie. And that was after he died. So that plays in my mind quite often. As I say, I don't quite know what the 3 warm segments of a tangerine mean. But it's a pretty great, it's a great message, isn't it? If you just let go.
You find your higher
you find your higher purpose through your higher self. And the weird thing was as well, not long after that, I was in India visiting a friend who lived in Goa, and I was with another friend, and we were walking along, and I was telling her about this dream, and she went, "Oh my God, look at that wall over there." The wall, and sort of written on the wall, it said, just let go, and then it said never-ending peace and love. I don't know, just
I must admit that would be with me forever. That was that's one hell of a dream. That's amazing.
I know. I need, if anyone's got any ideas about what the 3 segments of the tangerine are that are warm, I'd be very curious to know. And
warm as well. God, you really, did you wake up and just write all that down? Because if I don't, it just goes. Or did you stay awake after that dream?
That one stayed with me. I dream massively every night, and my dream, it's like I have a movie every night, and I don't remember everything. Quite often when I wake up, it's there, but then it goes very quickly. But in some instances, like for example, the dream I just told you about, the the tangerine segments, that stayed with me, and I remembered that. And I was thinking about that today, actually. It's weird, isn't it? It's just one of these things. It kind of inspires me as well.
Well, I know. I must admit.
Great message. It's a great... I'm not saying it's from David. I mean, I'm not sort of, however it came about, it's just a great message, isn't it? It's a good...
I mean, it's definitely one to stay with you forever, really. So,
yeah.
So that's an amazing story, actually. God, because I've got a bit of an obsession with David Bowie, so but I won't go on about that quite yet because that would be too.
Oh, you can.
Perhaps a bit late. But yeah, so look, Birmingham. So this year, the Nightingales, Robert Lloyd, had this film out called King Rocker, and it sort of starts in Birmingham at the Bull Ring. So there's Stuart Lee talking about the Bull Ring and the sort of. God,
I need to watch it.
Yes, and so there's a lot about Birmingham and this club that they all went to, and there was members of Duran Duran and the guy from the Lilac Times Stephen Duffy as well was there.
Stephen Duffy, yeah, I know Stephen, yeah. I know most of them from Birmingham, actually, because it was just, we were all just kind of there in it together, we were just sort of young kids growing up and, getting into music and all of that, and in fact, my very first band before Swans Way, we were called Playthings, and we were on a TV show in Birmingham called Look Here that was presented by Toyah, and then we did a few dates supporting Duran Duran as well. That was when they first, when they released Planet Earth and it hit the charts.
My God, so you really did sort of get to see the boys, Roger, Andy, Simon.
Yeah.
I can't remember the rest, actually. Nick.
Well, there were the 3 Taylors, weren't there? There's Andy Taylor, Roger Taylor, and who was the other one? John Taylor.
John Taylor, the bass player. Simon. Yes. Yeah. So because of that stage, I remember, the film, with Robert Lloyd in Talk About the Nightingales, which is a great film if you get a chance to see it for many reasons.
Yeah, I must say, everyone's told me to watch it. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, it's a really lovely kind of story about a person's creative kind of journey and their ups and downs. My God, the ups and downs. But then, because, so your first band before you got into Swans Way. So what was the kind of progression from that first band to Swans Way then?
Oh my. Okay. Well, the Playthings was myself and Rick, and we had also a drummer and a bass player, and we went through a few different kind of lineups. I think maybe only one or two, and it was kind of sort of, I suppose, kind of rocky, indie, sort of bit glammy kind of. I remember I had a Wasp synthesizer which I loved, and Rick played guitar. He did most of the singing. I did some singing too. We kind of just knocked that on the head. We met this really interesting guy called Robert Shaw, and he'd been in a band. He was really totally into Joy Division, and he'd been in a band, I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, I can't quite remember the name. It might have been The Last Gang or something, but I don't know. They were kind of cool, from Wolverhampton. Anyway, we met Rob, and myself and Rick and Rob, we decided we all liked each other and we wanted to work together, but we weren't quite sure what we wanted to do or how we wanted to do it. But then we decided a really good thing to do would be if we all played instruments that we didn't really know how to play. Well, kind of had never played before. For example, Rick went on to double bass, and it's quite a big blooming thing to have in your flat when it's a very small flat. But anyway,
yes, that's the ukulele I can see, but a double bass, that's also a big investment, isn't it?
Well, do you know what? We probably had got it quite cheaply from somewhere. But anyway, so he played double bass, and it was decided I would play drums. Not, I'd never played drums in my life before. So, but actually it turned out I wasn't too bad on the drums. So I just basically did my own little kit thing, a bit more like the Stray Cats kind of setup. I had a snare and a hi-hat and a tom-tom. And then Rob just sang. So initially we were just double bass and me on drums and Rob singing. A bit later Rob did start to play a little bit of guitar, and I did backing vocals, and I did some piano, keyboards. But what we were listening to a lot of French movie soundtracks, and from an early age I'd sort of had little jobs in France, and I got French relatives and everything. So I say my mother was a great Edith Piaf fan. So I'd had a summer job in the Alps in France, and I've been listening to a lot of pop music by people like Joe Dassin, and so we were just, and we did love the music to Last Tango in Paris, which was by Gato Barbieri, beautiful soundtrack, and then we were sort of into a lot of movies. I mean, that was kind of really our influences. We kind of got labelled in with the new jazz. You've got bands like Sade and Blue Rondo a la Turk and various other bands, but we kind of were just doing our own thing, really. We weren't kind of like anyone else. And it just so happened that mine and Rick's next door neighbour had the flat next door with Simon Woods, who managed UB40 at the time. So it was a very small scene in Birmingham. Everyone kind of knew everyone.
My God.
And Simon had heard us rehearsing, and because we used to rehearse in mine and Rick's bedroom, actually, just double bass drums, and the three of us. It's crazy. And so we said to Simon, do you want to come and listen to us rehearsing? And he came in, and we had written Soul Train at that time, and he heard that, and he just really, really liked it, and he said he wanted to manage us. So, and of course, because I think he'd finished managing UB40 at that time, but obviously because he got some good contacts.
Yes.
I think it was Sony Publishing at the time, but were they called Sony? No, they were called CBS at the time. CBS Songs. Yes. They heard a demo that we'd done with several songs on. God, this is such a long time ago. This is 1982. Oh my goodness, long time ago.
40 years.
Nearly 40 years ago. Oh my God. Anyway, so they heard this song, this demo, and we signed a publishing deal with them. And can't remember how it came around. I mean, but we did a Radio 1 session, as you did back in those days, and then we got asked if we would if the Tube could come and film us. I think that's what kind of kicked it off, really. So the Tube came down to Birmingham, and there was a club called the Review Bar that was a strip club on the Soho Road. And so the Tube film crew came and filmed us playing Soul Train, and then of course it went on the Tube. And I think, that created some record company interest.
Yes.
Oh, prior to that, actually, we'd gone to, with our publishing deal, we'd gone down to Jacob's Studios in Surrey, which at that time it was a residential studios with a swimming pool, and we all thought this was rather fabulous because we were all very young. And but we considered ourselves radical, and we decided, everything we did had to be sort of completely radical. So we decided we'd go and record our first song, which was called Theme from the Balcony, and Simon Woods put it out on his label Exit International, and we decided we were going to record it with absolutely no EQ. That was it. So no EQ. So much to the amusement of the engineer at the time. But actually, we recorded it, and it was released as a single. My brother shot the cover. We used a friend of ours. We dressed him up in a sailor outfit and sat him under a cherry tree. Very sort of Jean Genet. And
that's very cool, actually. Because during that 80s period, because you mentioned, because it was there was you mentioned Sade, and there was also another band called Working Week, who might have come a bit later.
Yes,
but there was a sort of there was the bands like the Latin Quarter. So were you sort of picking up on that kind of rather chic sound? Because there was a sort of
we were just kind of really did our own thing. We were quite up our own bums a bit sometimes, but at the same time we really weren't pretentious at all. We would laugh a lot, and we were daft as anything. I mean, I remember one time, oh my goodness, Mike, do you remember Mike Mansfield from Cue the Music? He did this
yes.
He did this documentary on us, which included filming us at the Astoria, Charing Cross, but also filming us, it was all very camp. He wanted to have coffins exploding and stuff, and we said that's not quite our kind of thing, really. But he recorded us at this, filmed us at this disused, they used to call it a mental institution in Virginia Water. And it was just so funny. I remember one time me and Rob, we were being interviewed, and we just couldn't stop giggling all the way through. And in the end, they couldn't use our interview. They had to. They interviewed Rick because he was far more sort of somber and coherent. Because all me and Rob could think of was this little mouse that was running across the floor. But anyway, there is a funny. There's a funny. It used to be available on video. I'm sure it's around somewhere. It's called History and Image, and it was like an hour-long documentary. I think there was a series, but it was a mixture of us playing at the Astoria, Charing Cross, and then being filmed. And it was quite funny. But as well as like having a right old laugh, we would come out with some of these preposterous statements. I remember once in the Face magazine, we said, what was it? We said, we're pissing in a desert while everyone else is farting in the vacuum. I think we thought we were very clever to come up with that.
That's not bad. It's good. It's good. So you
really. You
were veering towards the kind of Blitz kids, so that kind of whole sort of cool London scene as well.
Well, yeah. Do you know what? Yeah. It was really interesting. Much later on, and I've met quite a lot of people, from the 80s, and especially now later. Funnily enough. I'm quite good friends with Steve from Spandau Ballet, and then, one of the guys from ABC as well. And, becoming friends with them much later in life, and sort of hearing, what they thought of us as musicians way back then.
Yes.
We had quite a lot of kudos, I think. People seem to quite like us, but we weren't particularly aware of that at the time. We just kind of lived in our own little bubble, really. And we were from Birmingham, like the whole Blitz thing was going on in London. whereas we were sort of still living in Birmingham.
Yeah.
So we had our own thing going on. The Rum Runner Club was our kind of thing. But actually, yes, we were kind of, we just kind of did our own thing, really.
Well, I think with most bands, when I spoke to them now, after all these years, wished in a way, there's a few wishes, some people have just a couple, like a list. But, it's like, I wish I'd been a bit friendlier to other bands, or I wished but often it's a shyness and a sort of insecurity, and then that comes over as a sort of sort of being offish and also a bit arrogant. But it was like, no, I was just kind of really I just was kind of too scared to talk to anybody. But people often read it. But now, you're a bit old, one gets older and sometimes just goes, hello. And it's
God,
yes.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You meet people, you come across people, and then you chat about the past, and then you forget about the past and you just talk about the present.
Yes, I know, it's not, absolutely. But that kind of first introduction of just saying hello and just kind of being friendly is almost like, oh my God, I can't bear it. I can't, they'll just ignore me. They hate me. I'll just assume they hate me. I'll just go over here. And they think, God, that person's so offish. And it's like, no, just couldn't, just.
There is that, it is, I know what you're saying, absolutely. And I think we were all so young. And, when you were doing things like the Tube or Top of the Pops, your paths crossed, but there was this, I think we all had a certain kind of aloofness, and I think you're probably right, it's probably more of a sort of shyness thing, really, than anything.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just trying to, yeah.
So when you came to do the album Swans Way, which is the Fugitive Kind,
yeah.
This was with the famous producer, didn't you? You had Mike Thorne, who'd done Soft Cell, hadn't he? And he was kind of the hot producer of the time.
Yeah, bless him, Mike. Do you know what? I was with Mike more recently, actually, in 2014. I went and stayed with him in New York, and he's still got a studio down in Greenwich Village. He's got so many great stories to tell, because he worked with Marianne Faithfull as well, so many people. Yeah, we were sent over to work with Mike in New York, which was an absolute gas. It was absolutely amazing. We'd also been working in the UK with John Walters. Now, John used to be in Landscape. Do you remember Einstein and Go-Go?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Been that on the...
Yeah. So John was in that. So we did quite a lot of recording with him. But also, the record company sent us over because Mike was kind of, one of the producers of the time. He'd done Soft Cell, Bronski Beats, Carmel. Oh my God. And we just had the best time in New York. We were being sent over to New York, and, we had, the record company was just paying for everything, which is amazing. We were kids. We'd never been to New York. We were, it was our dream come true to come to New York. We looked, all our clothes were from the rag market in Birmingham, and then our friends Jane and Patty from Carn and Bell made our clothes as well. And, if you look too closely, you would have seen that my shoes were kind of, my black pointed shoes have got gaffer tape on the bottom holding them together. But, we arrived in New York and looking exotic and fab, and we'd said we wanted to stay at the Chelsea Hotel. So, yeah, it was amazing. So it was kind of dreams coming true. And we were, we were picked up at the airport in a limo with a drinks cabinet in it. I mean, this is just like kids from Birmingham, like, woohoo. We had the best time. And then we were given invites, to all of the clubs of the time, like Area and Limelight and the Pyramid Club and everything. And, like Grace Jones was hanging around. She was going out, I think, with Dolph Lundgren at the time. And it was just such a happening scene. And it was just brilliant. And we were just there, and it was just all happening. And, we went over a couple of times, actually, and we recorded at Electric Lady Studios, the ones that Jimi Hendrix.
Oh my God. So you went from kind of like small band in Birmingham to suddenly Electric Ladyland with the Hendrix, with Mike Thorne, who'd done Soft Cell, and just had that massive. So that must have been hard not to completely lose the plot on the.
It was great. It was just we were always, and like I remember our manager had always said, or someone had always said to us, don't get the F train, it's really dangerous. But like, we didn't give a shit. We were just kind of like, so, and I think also because we kind of looked kind of very quirky, no one really bothered us. We were absolutely fine. And this is in New York when, it wasn't as safe as it is today. I mean, New York, So anyway, yeah, we got the F train out to Coney Island, and it was amazing. And that movie, The Warriors, hadn't been out.
Oh
for that
God, yes, I remember that film.
Warriors, and all the graffiti for Warriors are still on the walls and stuff at Coney Island. So, oh God, it was amazing. And it was just a thing of like dreams coming true. All the movies we'd seen and loved, all those buildings, the Chrysler building and everything, and hanging out in places you shouldn't hang out in, and 42nd Street was
So
well
had you
dodged
also
at that time. I
gone
loved
to
it.
places like CBGB's and the Mud Club and Max's Kansas City? Did that come on your radar when you were in New York?
Well, I'm not sure if CBGB's was still open when we were there. I don't know what year it closed down, but no, I didn't go there then. We went, as I say, it was like Area, Limelight, and Pyramid Club were the ones that we were going to.
Blimey. God,
yeah.
it did make Birmingham probably look a bit sort of like a different world. Though I suppose you'd have still, at least it was.
Birmingham, there was something fabulous about Birmingham. We just used to trot around all the nightclubs. There were like loads of clubs and everything, and a great bunch of people. I mean, one of my close friends still is Martin Degville from Zig Zig Sputnik, and he now lives just up the coast from me. He's at St Leonard's in Hastings, and we were mates when we were teenagers in Birmingham. And he's one of the most creative people you could ever meet, and Boy George has always said that, Martin is one of his biggest influences ever. They shared a flat together. And when I first met Martin, him and George were doing a stall in in Oasis Market in Birmingham. No, there was a lot going on. It was a really vibey scene. And, New York was cool.
Yes.
New York was
but
great.
Also New York in that period was still recovering. I don't know if it was recovering, but it still had that massive kind of problem with heroin, hadn't it, from the 70s, which had wiped out most of those kind of New York dolls, and most people were quite like a junkie really from that punk scene. So things were kind of messy until they basically passed away and died, because there was a lot of casualties during New York in that sort of punk period.
Absolutely.
So it was, and also in the 70s, I think New York was quite bankrupt. So there was a lot of that's why it was so cheap, because no one wanted to live there, which is kind of hard to believe, I guess, because at the time I have done quite a lot of interviews with people, and there's a guy who did a book on the Mud Club, and he sort of bought a place, which was so cheap. Wow, that was, but no one wanted to live there. That's why you had all these artists come in, and the birth of kind of, punk, rap and disco was all there, because it was like, well, there you go.
Yeah,
so,
and there was Studio 54 as well, wasn't there?
Yes. Oh God, absolutely. And Danceteria.
Yeah. Gosh.
So what's your memory of recording the album, by the way, with Mike? Did that sort of was that quite a smooth process?
Yeah, actually, we did the sort of pre-production work at his place in Greenwich Village. And because he programmed quite a bit of stuff. He used a Linn drum, and he had I think he still has it today, actually, a synclavier. But then we used a 4-piece horn section as well, the Uptown Horns. They came in and played. I mean, we've got the songs already written. I'm trying to think how many songs we actually recorded with him. It's like 3 or 4. We'd already written them, and obviously he'd heard the demos. And because he did use the Linn drum. That was that sort of that sound of the time.
Yes.
And so we just did our, Rick played bass, Rob sang, I played some keyboards, and then we had the horns as well. So that was, I mean, I think we went over twice. There were 2 different times that we went over, and each time it was great. It was just brilliant. Met some really great people working in the studio, who much later, a couple of years later, when myself and Rick were in Scarlet Fantastic, we went back and visited them, and happened to come across Brian Ferry recording there with Nile Rodgers. And so we ended up sitting in with Nile Rodgers on a session, which is kind of interesting. But that was later. That was when we were in Scarlet Fantastic after Swans Way. But anyway, back to Swans Way. With Mike Thorne. Just trying to think if anything particularly sticks out. No, just we just recorded. We just got on with it and made music.
So who was because at that time, because the 80s in a very simplistic way, but there were the gatekeepers. We had, like obviously, the mainstream press, and we had, daytime Radio 1, but we also had, the John Peel show, didn't we? Which was kind of fantastic for new bands. And there was like 3 weekly music papers like the NME, Melody Maker, Sounds, Record Mirror as well.
Yeah.
And then every city had a like alternative venue, didn't they? So
yes,
so you could get played a lot. So and there was huge amounts of scenes. The thing about the 80s and probably other decades, but I would say you had the New Romantics, but you had the goth scene, you had New Paisley, you had the birth of indie pop, the post-punk scene, psychobilly. So where were you kind of sitting? Who was championing the band when you sort of came out with the album?
Where do you think we fitted in?
Yeah,
I don't think we fit.
Yeah, because Sade had, you couldn't, remember any of the face, and you always had Sade on the phone. Probably wasn't quite like that, but memory serves me. It's like she was always on the cover of those kind of glossy magazines, like Hits, and also The Face. And I just wondered which, publications kind of were fascinated with your band.
Oh, it's interesting. Oh, you should say that. Okay, I don't think we. You couldn't really kind of bag us. You couldn't give us a label, and sometimes that's like a problem as far as record companies are concerned, because they always want to kind of label and give everything a genre. In terms of magazines and papers, we had a lot of support from Melody Maker, actually. We had a front cover of Melody Maker, if I'm not mistaken. I seem to think we did. A Swans Way, yep. I think we did.
Because the album cover is very cool, isn't it? Everyone looks very sort of chic, debonair, suited and booted, and sort of mysterious.
Yeah, that was a film image, actually. Interestingly, we had seen the particular idea of that cover was influenced by, I think it was a 1960s or 70s Italian excuse me, I think it was a movie soundtrack album, and I don't know which one it was, but the idea of it came from that. And how we did it, we shot. Simon Fowler was a great photographer at the time, and we used to like working with him. He shot a picture of me, my face, and back in those days when all of the sort of digital photography and it didn't exist, you weren't able to do things like you can do today, so things had to be done sort of more literally. So he shot a picture of my face and blew it up absolutely huge, so the picture of my face took up nearly the whole of a wall, and then the guys, Rick and Rob, had their photograph taken, and it was a black and white photo of my face, and Rick and Rob had their photo taken, looking pretty dapper in the suits and stuff with the sort of 50s style hairdos. They had their pictures taken absolutely right next to the big blow up.
Right.
My face. So that was what you see on the album cover. Is actually, it's kind of how we did it. These days everything would be done digitally. So also we decided a rather interesting thing to do. It's a sort of tactile thing as well. Was we had the cover. It was sort of this brown. I don't know what the material was, but kind of rough looking, and then it had this strip across, which was the photograph.
Right.
It was just something artistically that we liked. We really, to us, image was important, and we did spend a lot of time, thinking about how we presented ourselves. And it wasn't just for the sake of what we looked like, it was to kind of represent the music that we did and what we were saying. And
God, it does.
You know,
It's a mysterious looking cover, isn't it? Those guys looking at you in a wistful way.
yeah.
Nice. So yeah, which was kind of I just remember there was also those early, because I was a very, I loved indie pop from that period. Well, I loved anything from John Peel, but there was people like Everything But the Girl who was kind of also tapping into a certain jazz, acoustic kind of vibe as well. So there was
I think, I mean, we didn't purposely tap into sort of jazz vibe. It's just that I suppose we've been listening to a lot of film music, and some of the instruments that we were using, would be considered jazzy. And Rob had this sort of croony voice, so I guess it kind of, and you've got, as you said, there's Carmel, and I said Carmel, and you said Sade, and there were all these other bands as well. And I guess it was that sort of kind of new jazz thing, although we didn't think of ourselves as being like that. But I guess loosely we could have been bagged like that.
Because I suppose for me, one of the main things that happened in the 80s was the Smiths came along in 83, and suddenly there was kind of like, I think there was just that feeling of like, okay, there's a bit of a scene now, and they lasted 5 years. So there was like between 83 to 87, there was suddenly all these bands like the Triffids and the Go-Betweens and the Wolfhounds and all that kind of, that kind of scene. And I suppose, I was just at that age where I was particularly obsessed with it. So it all seems much bigger than it probably is. But then when the album comes out, which is kind of 84, 85, the band splits up, which is like, it's not even a second album. This is what happens in 85.
Oh, goodness. Do you know, I mean, I think we'd actually been together since about 82.
Right.
So, and when you were young, you kind of, you're fast moving, time takes on a different kind of feel as you get older. And, as you're older, I think you probably spend longer on things, possibly. I'm not sure. But I don't know. I think that, we'd done that album. And I think we'd kind of done everything and concluded everything that we really wanted to do within that format. And so I think Rob was ready to go off and do something different. I think myself and Rick, we were wanting to do something quite different as well, I think. We're ready for a change, for something new. And so we just kind of went off in our different directions. And so that's kind of why there was no animosity or anything, no great big sort of split. I think it just kind of fell apart quite naturally, really.
Yes, well, I think mostly they do in these moments. Oh, well, they don't always, but sometimes people just had lost the heart or the will, or they just they either make the phone call, or they just don't turn up to the next rehearsal. Did you have a sort of an official, that's it, Jim Morrison, this is the end moment with the band?
Oh, wow. Do you know, I can't remember. Isn't that strange? I can't remember. Just bear with me 1 second. My son's coming. Hello. Pardon? I'm just doing my interview and just chatting. Oh, okay. Maybe I'll go upstairs. That's probably the best thing to do. Just bear with me. Okay.
Oh, yes. Yes,
my son's just coming. No, just... Hi, just go in. I'm good. Yeah, just go in.
I'll hit resume.
I'm okay,
yes.
Fine.
So so that's the end. When the band finishes, do you have to do anything like, I don't. Is there any admin? What happens when a band finishes?
When a band finishes? Oh my goodness. Well, I don't think we were with our record label anymore. Phonogram, I don't think we were with them anymore.
Yes.
So there was nothing to sort of be done then. Obviously, the publishing. Well, the thing is that all of the rights have been signed away, for the songs to the publishing company, and then, the tracks that we'd recorded, they're owned and still are owned. It was Phonogram at the time that we signed to. But we didn't, Rob carried on working with the manager that we had, and myself and Rick just sort of set ourselves free. And I think it felt good to be free. I think we wanted to do something really new and really different.
Yes.
We didn't have to, you know, we weren't contracted to each other at all in any way. So it was just a natural progression, really. Rob went on to do other things, and so did myself and Rick, and we're sort of newly inspired. You know, we like to move on. We had different ideas about different things that we wanted to do.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's all good stuff. So then sort of by the mid-'80s, things had changed again, or sort of by 87, because obviously every scene starts to alter a bit, and a lot of those indie bands I loved sort of started splitting up. You know, most bands have a 5-year narrative, don't they? And then it all just, it's an interesting 5-year narrative. They get together, you know, 12 months, you know, messing around, doing their thing, get a single, John Peel, get the John Peel session, things are going well. The first album, things are going brilliant. And then it's a bit tricky, the second album, and then the third, and then it's all just put 5 years. So, you know, it's fair enough. But by 87, there's a kind of a bit of a musical kind of shift again, because the ecstasy world comes in, and then there's this kind of new push towards things like, you know, I don't know.
Summer of Love.
The Summer of Love. Oh, we can remember it. No, I can't. But if I remember it at the right place. But there was like, you know, you had the, you know, not Stone Roses at that point, but you'd had the sort of Happy Mondays, and then you had Primal Scream, the Soup Dragons, then Stone Roses, and the Orb started.
Soup Dragons. Funny you mentioned Soup Dragons. Hi-Fi Sean, the singer of the Soup Dragons, is one of my closest friends now.
Yes, good old Sean from the Soup Dragons, all the way from Scotland.
Yeah. We spend quite a lot of time together, and sometimes we do a bit of work together as well. Yeah, he's lovely, Sean.
He's amazing, you know, and such a, you know, like amazing how he's the indie kid, the absolute indie kid of the 80s, you know, mid-80s, and then he's this DJ, which is kind of doing all these amazing remixes and stuff like that.
I know.
So what happened? How did you then sit down one day and think, I'm going to be in another band with Rick?
Rick and I were an item.
Oh, you froze on that item. Damn, don't freeze. I think your internet might have gone. Oh no, don't tell me you're going to lose connection. Wait a minute. I'll hit pause. Wait.
I'm still...
Right. So yeah, you said it just froze when you said you and Rick were an item.
Yes, we were. You know, we lived together and we made music together. We really got into just this whole new vibe. We just kind of got into, you know, we wanted to do something. I wanted to do more singing, so I sang, and we were very influenced time by also, you know, nature. There were different influences that we'd had from when we were in Swans Way, and we got quite cosmic, I think, with Scarlet Fantastic, and
fantastic. So did you get into kind of earth energy and earth magic and
absolutely,
and
all of that?
Were you getting into
all of that? And the funny thing is, we got into all of that, and in fact, we were kind of really new age, I think, kind of before new age became acceptable and sort of popular. And
did you do sweat lodges and sort of worship the full moon, or at least kind of acknowledge it? And
no, we didn't do sweat lodges, but we just got into earth energy, and I just, you know, kind of had this idea that there was this sort of pool of consciousness that you could tap into, and that kind of inspired my song "Plug Me Into the Central Love Line."
Yes.
It's just all this kind of stuff, which nowadays, you know, people write books and sell millions of books about these subjects, but actually I kind of intuitively was into all of that kind of stuff back then. We did a big thing with nature. We used to go into forests, and the energy just felt really good, especially in Shropshire. We were into earth energy and stuff, and you know, writing songs like Follow That Star, and I just felt really connected. And
did you go to
you know,
stone
when
circles? Did you sort of find yourself in Avebury?
yeah,
or...
we did actually. We did. We've been in many stone circles.
This is great.
We
Well,
used to
actually,
go-
going back to that film, the Nightingales film, Stuart Lee takes Robert Lloyd to a stone circle near his place to sort of, talk about such things as stone circles, which is great, So you'll love that film.
Yeah, there was the Great Rollright Stones, because we always used to drive between, and it was probably before the M40 was built, driving between Birmingham and London a lot, because we recorded a lot in London. We'd stop off at all of those stone circles on the way and go and hang out. Yeah, we were well into all of that, very much so. And, moon energy of the sun. We used to go to this place called Witchbury Hill outside Birmingham. That was a sort of a big centre of ley lines and everything. And
yes, well, that was interesting. God, ley lines. We used to go on about ley lines so much, because there's this ley line, the St Michael's ley line, that runs from sort of down in Cornwall, I guess, and it comes through sort of Glastonbury and Stonehenge and Avebury, and it goes through, I don't know, it probably goes through which is a place in Suffolk, and then it comes out at sort of Great Lowestoft, just above Lowestoft, and it's kind of, people used to go on about going to the ley line and sort of, I don't know, trying to douse it, and going to Glastonbury Tour, and then the
I went there recently. Actually, I went to Glastonbury Tour recently. That was great. Loved it. I can't believe I've not been before. But no, I can't. Yeah, but what you see, that was interesting with yeah, I mean, yeah, just all of that stuff felt very, very connected. But we put a kind of glamour hippie kind of rocky kind of vibe on it. Like Rick, he was Captain Pleasure and I was Lovelady. We did a bit of a sort of cartoony thing as well. It's kind of like the real, the surreal, and the fantastic, and it was all kind of a bit far out, really.
You definitely did enter the summer of love there, didn't you? So with
and it was interesting because the song No Memory became, even though it was released in 87, it got picked up by Andy Weatherall and became quite big in 92, even more so than it had in 87, because it became like a bit of a Balearic thing. And, people loved the idea of the sun in their hair, the moon in their eyes, and not giving a damn because they're free.
Because we've got because they've been the Orb and then Beloved as well, with that track called The Sun Rising and Sweet Harmony. I just remember there was suddenly in the 90s, there was this kind of, everyone was, I don't know, it was all a bit, well, it's a lot of drugs really, wasn't there? But it's fine. But then, so you get together, not to the band, and then you get signed to Arista. So how did you manage to sort of find yourself getting onto such a major label?
Do you know what? Again, we'd done a Radio 1 session.
You didn't have a neighbour.
Radio 1 session. No, it wasn't a good neighbour this time. We'd actually been touting our cassettes at the time. Myself and Rick had been going around the record companies in our loud animal print coats. I think I was in a giraffe coat with very high heels, and I'm 6'2" and bare feet, but with high heels, I'm about 6'9". So I think we made a bit of an impression. So we're going around the record companies. He was wearing his zebra skin coat and his cowboy hat, and we were playing cassettes to people, and No Memory was on the cassette, and we met Jack Stephen, who at the time worked for CBS, and he really liked us. And then he didn't work for CBS quite soon after that, but he said, "Can I manage you?" And we said, "Yeah, sure." And he'd worked in a lot of companies before that, RCA and different things, and but anyway, we'd got a Radio 1 session, and because of that Radio 1 session, I think it might have been with Janice Long, I can't remember.
Yeah.
We then did the Tube again. We went up to Newcastle, and I'd kind of had this idea about how I wanted to do a film to No Memory, sort of like in mirrors and stuff, and filming outside and then projecting images. It's quite kind of psychedelic in a way, a bit surreal. And so we went up and we did this film for the Tube, and the record company saw it on TV, so we had quite a lot of interest. And then actually, bizarrely, it was so we did end up signing to Arista at the time, and also, Jack, our manager, introduced us to Pete Waterman at the Borough Studios.
Nice.
And he played Pete the demo of No Memory. And Pete said, well, I like this. He said, let them come in, they can come in. And we said, we want to produce ourselves. So we used the studio and we produced ourselves, and we worked with a guy called David Eastaugh, who's one of the engineers there. And we produced No Memory. And actually, I'll backtrack a bit. So we did that. And it was when Arista heard that, actually, that we got signed. We hadn't signed to Arista at that point, but we had done the Tube and we'd done a Radio 1 session and we'd had a lot of interest. So, but it was when we sort of played, when we recorded No Memory, that they sort of jumped up and down and signed us. So and then the deal was we got to use PWL Pete's studio on the night shift. We'd go in at midnight every night and we'd work with different engineers, Dave Washburn and a girl called Karen Hewitt from Australia. And those two, myself and Rick, would be there doing the all-night sessions, recording. And that's why we called the album 24 Hours, because we were recording.
My God, that's amazing, isn't it? Because it comes together really smoothly. You must have felt like at that stage, the planets had lined up for you.
I think,
oh, you've just gone.
I look back at that period of my life, those 10 years. And I think the planets were aligned, actually. But I think always the planets have been aligned. And I think whatever I've done and whatever I'm doing now is kind of what I'm meant to be doing.
Yes. So how did you, and then sort of as that sort of period, it's kind of, I don't know, there's so much that goes on in each little decade, especially this kind of period, which I probably I was a bit more obsessed with, because then, around sort of the late 80s and early 90s, we had the sort of grunge scene, but at the same time, there was the kind of the real sort of the rave world, especially with people like the Orb had started, hadn't they? And then sort of, DJs coming out and, the traveling community and sort of lots of free festivals and stuff like that. Did you sort of fit into any of those scenes, Had you become a sort of a soundtrack? Because there was people like Adamski who'd started as well.
Oh, Adamski. He's another friend of mine now, Adam.
Adam, yes.
Funnily enough, Adam might be doing a remix.
Oh. You froze. Don't freeze. Don't freeze. Freeze. Don't freeze. Don't freeze. You're frozen. Oh, you froze after Adam. Oh, I think you've just come back, actually. Come back. Don't lose it. Blast. Wait a minute. Right, okay. Yeah, so you said Adam might be doing a remix for the new single.
Yeah, he might do, of No Memory. Maybe at some point it's been talked about. You were saying, was I involved with people around that time? No, I actually fled the country. I didn't flee it at all. I met somebody that I fell in love with in South Africa, and he lived in Dublin, and then I moved to Dublin for a few years, and then I met my husband, Leif, an American cowboy, and we moved back to London, and it was that was in the early 90s, in fact, and that's when kind of No Memory had become kind of like a bit of a cult classic on the lyric scene, and on in a lot of the clubs around the country, Liverpool and stuff, an old school club called Daisy. I actually went back a few years ago and did a PA there, and there were like probably about 1,000 people, and they were all singing along to No Memory. This is in 2007. It was great. I loved
that's fantastic.
it.
So in that, so you did all that sort of in 87, 88 with the band and No Memory, and the sort of the album comes out as well, doesn't it? Which is 24 hours. So do you then sort of, for the next couple of years, do you sort of, is it the case that, the band is slightly not sort of happening so much, because you said you sort of went to, was it South Africa, and then Dublin, and then you...
Oh, okay. Well, no, we toured and everything. We did all that stuff. We did all the TV shows, Top of the Pops. We did MTV. I mean, we had a great time. We had fun. But things are kind of falling apart with the band and also with myself and Rick personally. And then I don't think we'd spent a day apart for many years. And I went to South Africa and I met someone, fell in love with him. He was an Irish guy. And I ended up moving to Dublin, as you do.
Yes.
And lived there for a little while and recorded some stuff over there, hung out with some Irish musicians. That was a really good, fun scene to be in at the time. You got like U2 and everyone all hanging out. And again, Dublin was it was when that film The Commitments was made,
Oh,
and
God,
there were
yes, of course.
bands like was it the Hot House Flowers, and then there was the last, there she goes.
Yes, that's one.
That one.
There was, yes, and
A lot going on, and I quite like the Irish scene, actually. That was good. And then I came back to London because I met Leif over in Dublin, my American husband, who I have worked with a lot, actually. We've done a lot of music together. And we kind of came back. We moved to London, and that was all in the early 90s. That I realised that kind of things were going really, really well with No Memory, and it become a bit of a cult classic on the Balearic scene and in a lot of the clubs around the country and everything.
Yes, because when you did the single, which is titled "Film Star Kiss," this has got was this mixed by Stephen Duffy, the famous Stephen Duffy?
Hang on, not like Stephen Tintin Duffy. No. Who would it be mixed by? No, it was people at PWL actually that mixed that. I'm trying to think who would have mixed.
There was kind of
oh, what? Don't I sound stupid?
No, God, I think Karen Hewitt was there, and
Karen Hewitt and Dave Washburn. Yeah, Karen Hewitt did a lot of the mixes actually, but it was the people at PWL were mixing the Scarlet Fantastic tracks. There were some really good mixers there and engineers. They were brilliant.
Yes, well, they certainly were on a roll. So then 91, the band finishes again. Well, your second band, well, no, the next band anyway. So then did you know it was coming? Did you sort of realise, actually, this is it?
Yeah, we weren't with a label anymore. The managing director at the time, who had signed us, who was really up for us, he was removed from the company. He lost his job. There was a whole shift of people that worked there. The employees all changed, and we hadn't really got any sort of real allies there, and so we didn't stay with the company. Yeah, we just, it was time to move on, I don't stick around for too long with things that aren't really working out. It's best to kind of move on, get refreshed.
So what happens then? Because there's kind of quite a gap then between that, and then you sort of resurrect the band in 2016, and then you've got some singles that have come out recently.
Oh my goodness, what have I've never stopped making music. There's so much stuff. I mean, if you were to go online and look at all of the things that I've done, myself and Leif, we were called Kale and Kale, it's about Cahal and Cahal, and we actually signed a publishing deal with Pete Waterman back in 92, and we're with him till 95, and then doing all our own stuff and recording our own songs, working there, and then recorded lots more stuff towards the end of the 90s, and then the beginning of 2000, end of the 90s, we ran a club in Notting Hill called El Dorado, where we did live music and stuff. And then we did an album called Club Silencio that we collaborated with Graham Crabb from Pop Release itself. We did that in 2000 and working on that in 2001. I had a baby, now 21 years old.
Yes.
We what else did we do? After doing the album with Graham, actually, I collaborated with Martin Watkins, who works with Mark Almond. He's the keyboard player in Mark Almond's band, and we did an album called Union that came out, I think, 2013. But before that, I did lots of different collaborations with people. I've made dance records, and then I decided to resurrect the name Scarlet Fantastic in 2016 with an album called Reverie. which is a sort of alternative folk album. But I
Wow.
like to keep the name Scarlet Fantastic because it's kind of the themes that I was visiting and the subject matter of Reverie is very much kind of in line with what I always was singing about with Scarlet Fantastic.
And was this just yourself? It wasn't with Rick this time. This is just you being Scarlet
Just me, actually. The Scarlet Fantastic album was recorded and engineered by Leif, my husband, who has now departed. He's left the planet. He died in 2017. But we've always done lots of work together. And since he's gone, I've carried on. I'm working with lots of different people. I've done a few things with Hi-Fi Sean. I'm working with a lot of local musicians. So
Yes, Jesus, that's always hard.
never really stopped. Never stopped. Oh, and I've had quite a lot of stuff. I write stuff that gets used, in like on movies and adverts. I did a song that was quite big for a Robinson's Juice commercial. So yeah, no, it's great if your music can get used.
Well,
but
absolutely.
I've got a lot of new songs coming out soon. I released 2, I think, last year as singles, but of course the whole COVID thing and lockdown affected, being able to go in the studio and work. I have a studio at home, and there's some brilliant musicians locally. I've a really fantastic keyboard player and double bass player, violin player. I've had all sorts coming in, and
so
I've co-written
with those 2 singles that came out, this Better Day and Make Way for Love. So was this kind of, is this going to be part of the next kind of album project that you're working towards, or were they just kind of standing on their own?
Make Way for Love was kind of a dance track, sort of pop dance. Better Day, I think, probably will be on the next album that I do. Better Day, it's sort of the new songs that I'm doing are kind of in that kind of genre. A couple of them I co-wrote with John Walters, again, who used to be in Landscape, the one that I worked with back in the 80s.
God, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I went to New York, actually, and in 2014, that was one of the other things I did, work with Mike Thorne again. And one of the songs on the album Reverie is a song called Beyond Pluto, and we wrote that together. So yeah, I've never stopped really. I mean, I've worked with Japanese DJs. I do a lot of stuff. I collaborated with a Swedish guy, a Norwegian guy. Just, I'm always up for a good old collaboration if anyone wants to collaborate with me.
Yes, well, absolutely. My God, that's fantastic. I'm so pleased that you sort of, because some people, that I've interviewed, that music period where they were, for that 5 years of intensity is often it. And then, 30 years later, they start to find the love again. But it's great that you'd never stopped sort of making music.
I never, I've lived a life in between. I've travelled a lot. I'm a traveller. I love travelling, and I intend to do a whole lot more. I've been to a lot of places, and got a son, had a dog, lived a life. But I've always done music as well. So I'd say music and travelling are kind of my passions, and people. I love people.
Yes, that's fantastic.
Hanging out, all kinds of different people. I find, music, art, people, just conversation. It's all very interesting. It kind of sort of rocks me boat, really,
Absolutely. So if you were able to say something to your 16 or 18-year-old self starting out in the interesting world that is the creative arts and music, is there anything that you would have just kind of whispered in their ear that you'd have thought, yeah, that would have been handy to know, or yes, that's a good thing to do, keep doing it?
I would always just say to people, just follow your passion, just be passionate, just do whatever you need to do. Don't go for like the safe thing of, thinking that you just want to get a job and make some money and just get through. Just follow your passion before it comes too late. Before you just got to believe in what you think you want to do and just follow your dreams and follow your passion. I mean, I always say that to people, always. Sometimes I get asked to go in and talk to some of the music production students at Brighton Uni. I'll go and do a bit of a guest lecture. And basically, I just G them all up. I just say, don't give up with what you're doing. And in fact, funnily enough, the guy I use now, who's an engineer who comes into my house, is one of the students I met about 5 years ago. And he got in touch with me and he was asking me for contacts for production music, because I do quite a bit of production music. And I said, oh, how's your engineering? And he said he was a good engineer and enjoyed engineering. I said, well, you can come over and do some engineering for me then. He's absolutely brilliant. He's really, really good. So, yeah, I mean, I just follow your passion, whatever it is, because life's too short to not, live in the day, be in the moment and follow your dreams. What else can you do?
I know, keep rocking. Jesus Christ. I know that's, yes, I know. It's kind of strange though, as you get older, dealing with those setbacks and ups and downs. I find that quite hard.
It's different. You asked me what I would say to a 16 or 17-year-old. I might say something completely different to a 55-year-old. David, listen, I'm going to have to go because my son's just got in and I've got a feeling there might be a courier arriving any minute. So.
And I think on that cliffhanger, we're going to say, that is it. To quote Jim Morrison, the end. Anyway, that was a massive thank you to Maggie K. De Monde from Scarlet Fantastic and various other musical combos. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just do C86 Show. Also, all these have been archived. Aren't you lucky? You can find those on Spotify, iTunes, and good old Podbean. Indeed. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.